Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, my name is Jeff Punch. I'm the Assistant Dean for Research in the Faculty of Science and Engineering, so it's one of the four faculties of the University of Limerick. I'm just going to give an overview of the research areas. I'm not going to go into great depth in any individual one. Just to be clear, there's a large set of researchers in the faculty. So there are 200 academics, many of whom are research active. Within the faculty, there are over 400 full-time research students, the majority of which are PhD students. There's quite a large cohort of PhDs there. So my purpose here is to give very much a top-level overview as opposed to going into anything in great detail. If anybody wants further information, feel free to contact me, and then I can pass on the inquiry to the relevant academic in the particular area. So the faculty is structured as follows. There are three schools. So that's School of Engineering, of which I'm a member, School of Design, which also contains a sort of a subset, which is the School of Architecture, the School of Natural Sciences, which is basically biological sciences, chemical sciences, and physics. And then there are three standalone departments, so Computer Science and Information Systems, Electronic and Computer Engineering, and Mathematics and Statistics. So these are the academic structures. So to be clear, any PhD students or master's students in the faculty will be associated with an academic supervisor or maybe multiple supervisors who are faculty members of one of these schools or departments. So that's the home of the postgraduate. What I'm going to do, however, is running in parallel with these academic structures of schools and departments, there are a number of larger research entities, institutes and centres. And because we're talking about the research areas, I'm going to largely focus on these research structures. So to be clear, what I have in front of us here is the academic structures, the departments and schools. But running in parallel with that, there are these research centres and institutes. I'm going to give an overview, and I'm not going to cover the full research content in the faculty in a comprehensive manner because it's just too broad. Before I move on to the institutes and centres, and again, I know this is being recorded, so this is very much, and I'm not going to go through this, but this is a sort of a top-level screen dump, so to speak, of the areas of research within these various different schools and departments. So, for example, School of Engineering, the one I know best because in that school, composite and aerospace materials, manufacturing, fluid mechanics, microfluidics, energy and thermofluids, biomedical materials and devices. They're very much the classical topics of engineering. I stress is, again, if there are any keywords here on playback that catch your eye, that are a direct influence to you, please contact me and I can pass you on to the relevant academic who's working in that area. So there's a very broad range there. If I move on then to the research structures, the largest of these within science and engineering is an entity called the Bernal Institute. So this is the university's largest research institute. It's embedded within science and engineering. It's very much built around the topic of materials. Okay, so in that, I'm guessing we're looking at the engineering disciplines of mechanical engineering, topics like biomedical, aeronautical, and so on, and also very strong representation from the sciences, chemistry in particular, physics, and also aspects of biology. In the line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the main interests of the Bernal are in challenges related to health, energy, and the environment. So these are very high level. These are very high level goals. In terms of how the Bernal is structured, in terms of its themes, my apologies. There's just physical scale of the institute is shown there. So it's on campus. It's a contiguous set of laboratories, and quite an advanced set of facilities available there. In terms of the themes within the Brunel, so remember structured materials is the overarching topic. There are 4 constituent research themes. Biomaterials for application within the human body, for example. Composite materials, so for, say, for example, for aircraft or aerospace applications. Molecular nanomaterials, very small scale materials there. And also process engineering, which aligns to chemical engineering and has particular application within the pharmaceutical sector. For anybody from outside the Irish ecosystem, you take a look on the left-hand and right-hand side there. There are nationally within Ireland, very large centres funded by either Science Foundation Ireland or Enterprise Ireland, which is the agency that supports enterprise. The Science Foundation centres, of which there are 15 to 20 nationally, these are multi-university, they're very large animals. They all feature very significant industry engagement and interaction. And the Brunel hosts one of these centres. It's called SSPC. I'll talk more about that in subsequent slides. And it is a member of the ones shown there on the right-hand side. So it's a member of 7 of these centres spread across the country. Like I say, these are the biggest entities on the Irish research landscape, and the Brunel is very active in these. Brunel researchers and investigators are also active in smaller Enterprise Ireland funded centres, which I'll briefly talk about as well. But those are the topics: biomaterials, composites, molecular nanomaterials, and also process engineering. I will talk specifically about some of these centres that Brunel is active in, and also across the wider science and engineering faculties or departments and schools also. So science and engineering hosts 3 of these SFI centres: SSPC, which is the Synthesis and Solid State Pharmaceutical Centre; Lero, the Irish Software Research Centre; and the Confirmed Centre for Smart Manufacturing. So these are 3 of Science Foundation's 15 plus centres across the country. I'll talk more about the themes there to give you an idea of the sort of research that's going on in these entities within UL and the opportunities that might exist there. On the right-hand side, Enterprise Ireland, which is more geared towards supporting Indigenous Irish industry. These are smaller centres which have a very applied focus. So 3 of them are hosted within the faculty: TPTC, which is dairy processing; PMTC, pharmaceutical manufacturing; and ICOMP, which is a composite centre. I'm not going to say a lot about these. Focus more on the SFI centres on the left-hand side. As I mentioned, anybody who's got further queries, feel free to contact me, and I can pass you on to the correct contact person there. Now, just profiling some of these larger centres. SSPC is, as I mentioned, its mission is basically to advance pharmaceutical science, pharmaceutical industry within Ireland. Ireland is obviously a very strong centre for that. Multinationals present in Ireland, for example. In terms of the research, and again, this is where the more specific opportunities may lie. So the theme there is from molecule to material to medicine, and within that, pharmacynthesis is an important strand. Crystal growth is a particular strength of UL in this space, and also drug formulation and manufacturing. So these are where you will see the specific PhD opportunities, the specific postdoctoral research opportunities. Now, I just want to note one thing. SSPC, like all of these SFI centres, are spread across different Irish universities. Many of these opportunities lie within UL, but some of them lie with other partner universities across the Irish third-level ecosystem. These, like I mentioned, these are very large entities, and there's lots of opportunities there. Moving on to the second significant SFI centre hosted by UL within the science and engineering. This is Lero. It's a very long-established centre going back about 15 years or more. It's the Centre for Irish Software Research. Very much everything to do with software and the software process. So I would say you could class this as software engineering and the process of creating software. If I move on to the particular strands, you can see here on the slides the sort of themes that they're working on. very much categorized under systems, methods, and also governance. Yes, this is software. Yes, this is computer science, but it's very much the aspects of the process of software engineering. One point to note here is that with any of these SFI centers, these are heavily engaged with industry partners. So they're full participants in the center. They help to define the research agenda. They help to apply it. So what's interesting about PhD opportunities within these centers is most likely that your scholarship will feature some engagement with the industry partners of these centers. So that's very attractive for anybody working in science and engineering. Moving on to the youngest of these centers within UL, Confirmed Center for Smart Manufacturing. This is about three years older. Essentially, the topic here is manufacturing. So obviously, manufacturing is a very broad application space. But one thing that's in common there, and if I move on to the research structure and themes, increasing levels of sensorization, if you pardon the term, artificial intelligence and the extensive use of modeling in improving manufacturing processes. So whether this is, for example, manufacturing of medical devices or consumer electronics or anything like this, there are certain common elements to all of these. And you may have heard the term Industry 4.0. There are huge opportunities in this space. Again, it's hosted by University of Limerick. It's hosted within the Faculty of Science and Engineering. It features participants from the engineering school, also electronics, and also computer systems. And I should stress also partners from other universities within Ireland. So anything to do with manufacturing and how that world is evolving is key here. So these are the SFI centres. As I mentioned, I'm only presenting a flavour of the overall activities crossing the faculty. I would like to concentrate on one other large-scale initiative. Again, it's funded by Science Foundation that exists within the faculty. This is a very different entity than the SFI centres I've just mentioned. These are called the SFI Centres for Research Training, or CRTs. They're modeled very much similar to the Centres for Doctoral Training that have been established in the UK for many years, CDTs. I mention this because the specific focus of these centres is PhD education. And bear in mind that this centre is only a couple of years old. There are others across the country. They're very much in the data science space. It looks as if the Science Foundation will place more emphasis on these type of centres. So for anybody interested in PhDs, watch this space, CRT, Centres for Research Training. And what's very unique about these, and as I mentioned, the focus here is on PhD education. So if you take a look at the scale of the Foundations of Data Science, which is hosted within Maths and Stats Department in UL, this will train over 100 PhD students over its 7-year lifetime. So that's a very large entity just in terms of PhD education alone. Now note that this is not all these students are not hosted in UL. There are partner institutions there, particularly UCD and Maynooth. Any of these CRTs will be multi-institutional. There is an industrial element, so that's also very attractive. You can see top of the right there some of the brands that are backing this, for example, Analog Devices, Vallejo, and so on, Microsoft. So some big names there. What's unique about this is the idea that these students form a cohort. So any 1 year, you're talking about maybe 30 students intake across all of the partner institutions. For their first year, the cohort across these multi-institutions are experiencing courses together, courses in different partner universities, residential weeks and so on, before they start on their individual research project. So if you like, it's the American structured PhD model where your first year is almost generic, almost, I stress, and then your final 3 years is very much focusing on your research project. But what's unique here is that you are part of a much larger cohort. If I take a look on this slide, you can see how the program is mapped out there. In year one, there's a lot of this workshops, group projects and so on, where you are very much part of your working with your peers. And then years 2, 3, and 4, you're concentrating more on your individual research work leading up to your thesis. But there are also group activities there, symposia, conferences, and so on. And the idea is you remember your work is in conjunction with a sponsoring company or enterprise, and you get to experience placements with them as well. I stress this is one example hosted by UL. There are other activities in UL of these CRTs as partners, but it's looking likely that there will be many more of these funded by Science Foundation in the years to come. They're very attractive entities, so keep an eye on this space. Just to close, then, you can see the URL given there for the faculty and also my email address. My intention is not to give a full, very detailed view of all the research happening across science and engineering. There's too much there to achieve that in a short presentation. I wanted to give some highlights. I chose the larger SFI funded entities because these are quite prevalent and large scale, but there are many other themes funded by a range of different sources, European Union funding, Irish Research Council, and so on, which, again, feel free to ask me any questions about individual themes. So on that, I'll open up for questions. So if anybody has questions, you can either unmute your mic and ask, or if you want to just ask via the chat, far ahead.
Hi, Jeff. Can I just ask a question? Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah,
it was great to get that overview of what's happening within science and engineering. Could I just ask you about the CRTs, or the Centres for Research Training, as you said, model on those UK centres for doctoral training? And what's the process for somebody who comes in with a as a PhD candidate? Is there a competitive process involved in them becoming a scholar within the Centre for Doctoral Training? Is it a competitive process within UL and within other institutions, or how do they become, if you like, or how does one become a fellow or a scholar within a Centre for Research Training?
So it may differ slightly from centre to centre, but one of the central ideas is that remember, because these are cohorts, there's very much per year, there's a single recruitment drive. So the centres advertise, both formally and obviously by word of mouth by the various different academic supervisors involved. But it's very much that, again, because all the students are starting on the same date every year, because they are part of this cohort, that there's a sort of a central advertising and recruiting drive per year. So again, each centre has its own web presence, and they do their best to get the word out there to various different potential candidates. So very much it's a sort of it's between advertised and also word of mouth that the candidates are essentially attracted to the program.
Yeah. Excellent.
These are very attractive entities, so competition is pretty strong for the positions. They're very, very prestigious. I perhaps should have said at the top, for almost all of the researchers, PhD students and masters within science and engineering, the students are in receipt of a scholarship that covers their fees and a stipend, and also obviously costs associated with running the projects. CRTs are no exception to that. I think there are plans to be many more CRTs in this space. Any further questions? Okay, so thanks everybody for participating, and my contact details are on the slides, jeff.punch@ul.ie, if there are any further questions there or queries.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much. That was really great. Thanks.
Okay,
thanks a million. And that was, as I say, that was a really fascinating overview to get of the research areas in science and engineering, and hopefully it will trigger some questions among those participants today. So,
okay.
Great
Thanks,
stuff.
Jared.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.